today you need to configure how to configure an ingress. You can have multiple ingress controllers based on class. So it used to be the time that you were specifying the class through an annotation, and then new versions of Kubernetes added this field called ingress class names that you actually put in the spec of like which controller should be handling this ingress object. So you can have multiple ingresses installed.
Yeah, so I'm fresh on this. Thanks to you, Carlos. I've been using Contour Envoy for my gateway API, and I don't need to do any annotations.
Nope.
For my cases, the basic object definition of an HTTP route covers everything, and life's good. Life's good.
Glad to hear that.
Ingress, you have to learn all the annotations.
Yeah, because it's custom configuration for every implementation.
Yeah.
So, CoreDNS. I don't remember CoreDNS in exam to know what's there. Only thing about CoreDNS, I'm doing some work recently on helping end users / customers on how to properly scale CoreDNS. In our offering, we support a proportional autoscaler because the way you scale CoreDNS, you don't want to have a one pod of CoreDNS for every node that you have in your cluster. If you have like 500 nodes, you don't want 500 CoreDNS pods, but you need to have more than 2, right? So it's proportional to the number of nodes. That's kind of like the best practice. I don't know if people were aware of that. You were aware of that, about Jack?
No clue. No clue. I'm just
So yeah, when you have massive amount of like pods, for example, a massive amount of nodes, there's a lot of traffic on these 2 little pods that you usually start. Usually with 1 when I'm playing in my laptop, but usually have 2. But they get saturated. So that's why you need to have metrics monitoring, like the response time of the CoreDNS, DNS, TCP, UDP calls. So those Prometheus metrics, you grab them, you put them somewhere, and you monitor them. And then you need to scale them, like watch for them. And then you more replicas. So maybe you have 6 pods. If you have, 16 nodes, and depending on the pods that you have, the traffic that you have. So you need to adjust it based on the number of traffic, CoreDNS. That's if you at scale, that's one of the components that folks need to watch. So that's what I've been doing lately with CoreDNS, helping folks best practices on that. What else is in networking? I think that's it. Monitoring and logging is around.
So under networking, I have learned that I need to understand networking well enough to do troubleshooting.
Yeah.
And is you have to know networking to do troubleshooting. And I thought I saw a troubleshooting section somewhere in a table of contents or the abstract of the training.
Really? Okay.
No, just asking. I thought I saw when Mélony first presented her stuff. I thought that was a section on troubleshooting.
Oh, part 3, troubleshooting. Yeah, part 3 is troubleshooting. So, kind of saying troubleshooting, you're going to use monitoring and logging to troubleshoot, right? So I think that's
I have something set up. I have the gateway API set up. I have the service deployment. Everything's perfect. It should work perfectly. I've done it 20 times before, and it doesn't work. And so then I have to check each segment, and it still doesn't work. And then I go, now what do I need to do? And so that is that next level of detail.
So she has troubleshooting components here. She has steps on how to inspect the namespace, events, right? What are the things you need to look for if you're threading pods? So in the exam, you may have some problems, like put in the cluster, and then your task is to fix them, right? Find out what's wrong. Yeah. Why something's not working. I was going to put this, you were saying about troubleshooting networking. If you're not familiar with this tool called NetShoot.
Yes.
I use it all the time. This is my tool to go. So if folks are watching, Yeah, I usually run like an ephemeral pod if you're allowed in your environment, and this will have some utilities like netcat, curl. You can run it on the host network if you have problems like getting an IP address, like your kubelet is not giving you VPC CNI is not giving you an IP address. You can run in a host. So then you can go and do troubleshooting from the host perspective if you're trying to troubleshoot the node or the node communication to something. So very useful for that. But NetShoot is not part of the CKA, so you cannot use it. So you have to use the whatever is
I made a
available.
whole gist of all of the networking troubleshooting tools.
Oh, if you want to share that,
Sure.
and it's public,
But
put it in the
the thing
chat.
was, I wrote it, and then I found NetShoot, and I go,
Oh, okay.
it was one thing at a time. I go, because I was every time I would fix something, I would make a note of what tool I used, and then I grew my list, and then I found NetShoot.
Yep. So troubleshooting, when I used to also give workshops for people like getting started in Kubernetes, the enterprise I was working with, and also to prepare them for CKA. I used to have a very fun exercise that I told them, run this command in your cluster. So it was a base64 YAML file. So like make it very like hidden, like run this command and it will break. It will install something that is really broken, pod, a deployment or something else. And then like spend the next hour of asking people like how to fix it. And people will say, try this, try that. And like, oh, I'll try. I keep trying and not working. And then I give them the answer, like the next thing and then the next thing and the next thing. So it was a couple of breakers. If you like that type of thing, there's a YouTube channel. I don't know if you're familiar, but it's Clusterlets from Cluster. This channel from the Raw Code Academy. There's a playlist. There's about every week. This used to be my learning experience with troubleshooting Kubernetes. So at least I appear maybe in 2 episodes, I think. I cannot remember. Let me get the link. How do I get to the link? Yeah, this one. Also, it helped me to study for the CKAD exam, and it's very fun. Like he will set up 2 clusters for us, and then invite 2 guests or 2 teams, and then each one will break a cluster for the other person to fix it live in the live stream. So the live stream is about like how you have 40 minutes or 30 minutes to fix a cluster that the other team broke, and then you fix it, and then we switch places, and then the other team fixes the cluster that the other team broke. It's a lot of fun learning Kubernetes that way because it's a broken cluster, and the goal is to fix the app and fix the cluster. So this one, since we're talking about troubleshooting. Anyone familiar with this?
I'm not. I just subscribed to them. This is right up my alley.
So yeah, this was back.
I feel like I have a whole suite of experience. I could do YouTube videos on the things I've had to fix.
So yeah, 3 years ago, I don't know if it has the date or not. I watched. It was 3 years. I thought it was more. I swear it was before pandemic. Maybe there's more episodes. They're not in this playlist, but they're in the channel. I show up in 1 or 2 of those. I broke a cluster very fun way. I created a validation. I replaced kubectl with a different command. So it looked like kubectl, but it wasn't kubectl. No, I replaced kubectl with an alias function. I added a mutation webhook or validation webhook, but when you did kubectl get validation webhook, it didn't show up because I was like hiding it when you run kubectl. So you couldn't figure out that was a validation webhook that was hidden because you were not able to list it. So that was fun. And then the validation webhook was just breaking your app. It was not allowing you to update the app. That's the thing that came up. And it was not installed. It was not running on the cluster. It was a URL that was running somewhere else. So to teach people that validation webhooks and mutation webhooks is basically they can call anything. Like it doesn't have to be a pod. You can call it a URL. anywhere, another cluster, like anywhere, a Lambda function or a serverless function. So that was a fun episode to break it. You see, so yeah,
Very
let's go
good.
to.
So you're like a guest celebrity. You're a guest.
No, I just show like
guest
once or
star,
twice. I didn't show that many times. Wally show up multiple times. Wally is a good member of the community. I learned a lot from Wally, and he has a good repos with examples on a CKA exam. So let's look at killercoda to see which examples shall we do today. Let's see how we're doing with time. I think we have 30 minutes. See how many exercises we can do today in this amount of time. I didn't open killercoda because the free version I think is 60 minutes, and then you need to wait and stuff like that. But if you're taking the exam, I think it's worth the $10 a month, and then like pay it for 1 month. So let's take I think last time we did the scenarios from Chad. Should we do other scenarios or just continue and finish Chad's exercises? What do you people think?
Whatever you think.
Okay,
let's go with Chad.
Let's go with Chad. Let's finish
Yeah.
Chad, and then give him feedback. And I have the checkboxes also. So I think last time we did create a role binding. This one is duplicated. Create a new cluster role binding that cluster role. Oh, this is cluster role. So we can do this one. Another one we did last time was so let's start with RBAC. So we get a cluster. Can people see my screen? Okay. Should I make it bigger?
A little bit small, but yeah, it's good.
Like that?
Yeah, it's better.
So this is my first command that I always do, followed by get ep. This is Jack. This is the best troubleshooting command that I think I found. I always like if something's not working. I do have endpoints. So get ep-a, right? I have endpoints. So if this thing is empty, it's like I have a networking problem. I don't have IP addresses endpoint. So
I just want you to know I have never done that before. I just made a note. That's it. Thank you very much.
Yeah, EP, because get all doesn't give you everything usually in the namespace that you're working, but the EP is actually the endpoints that the service is creating. So the endpoints is the actual thing that is for the load balancer or for the service, like to get those IP addresses and if they're correct and check the labels of the service.
I get all, that's me. Or get all or minus capital A, that's me. This EP stuff, I get no idea.
Yeah. I propose that we added the endpoints to all, but I think that was a command that was created once and didn't want to update it. So it says to create.
I want to help just normal people.
So the first one is, I don't know if there's questions on the chat or something. Maybe I missed it.
Nothing there. I was monitoring.
Thank you, Efed. So it says create a new cluster role. Since it says cluster role is going to be a global one. Acme Core that can create deployments, replica sets, and daemon sets. So create, if you translate that to HTTP, I think in RBAC it's just create. Let's see. I always get confused because of the HTTP commands. So and then for the exam, you can do YAML and create the YAML by scratch. But the recommendation is always to use the kubectl create cluster roles instead of role, with the name of the role and then the verb. This is where I always like double check the documentation because I always think in terms of HTTP verbs, and I always want to put here a put or a post. So it's create, which translates to what? Do people want to guess what is a HTTP verb?
Post. Put. Post.
Put.
I don't know. I don't know the difference between put and post.
Well, post is usually for creating. Put is for updating, but that's a big blank statement. It depends on the implementation, but and if you're a purist of HTTP verbs, which I was at one time, not longer, I don't care anymore. So resources is the things that you want to create. So this will create you enough. You can create the YAML and inspect it. But yeah, let's execute it. Let's execute this. And then I don't know why it says get cluster role. It should say the cluster role that we created, right? Acme. And then this thing has autocomplete. Let me put it at the top. So that command, that's feedback for chat. It should say like the one that we created. And if you want to see it, it should see -o YAML, right? To inspect it, that you got it correct. So if you are a YAML engineer, you will know what this means. It's a cluster role. The API groups is apps. So remember that deployments is under apps, where secrets, config maps are under empty, doesn't have an API group, but these three are under apps, and then create. So that's the things to remember. So that should be easy for the exam. The next one is bind the cluster row, Acme Core cluster row, I think the one that we just created, to the service account, Secure SA, but that service account needs to be in a namespace. Make sure that the Secure SA service account can only create the assigned resources within default namespace. So always doesn't have to be the default namespace, but that's what I put there. Maybe in the exam they will give you like a namespace called foobar or whatever, some weird name. And verify that can only create deployments, which is with the command can I. So the answer is you will use a create role binding, not a cluster role binding, right? Cluster role binding or role binding? Let me think about it.
Should be role binding, probably, no? Because it's only default namespace.
If it's in namespace resource, I think you can create it inside. You can create a role binding that. So that's the thing that also that I don't know if people are aware, but in practice, the way that I usually work with RBAC is I create the cluster role as like the definition of like permissions by itself, like you see here in front of me. And then you start creating role bindings in namespaces, but the role that you use is not a role on that namespace, it's the cluster role. So it's like efficiency. It's like keep it dry, like keep the role definition in one place and then use it everywhere. So that's kind of like the mental model to think about when you work with this. So it'll be a role binding with that name, the cluster role, which is some people think that they cannot use cluster role in role bindings. I think that's the misconception. But that's kind of the pragmatic practice of using it. And then service account, you always have to remember to put the namespace in front. So it's like that default semicolon and then that. And all this information you don't remember is always in the create, for example, role binding, -- help. All this information is always here. It tells you, service account, always have the namespace column and the service account name, and always look for the examples at the top. There's usually from 3 to 5 examples at the top that will give you. So between that, the parameters and the usage, you should be able to figure out what these commands are. So the first two are going to create them, and then the other ones is going to do the auth can I. So let me execute.
By the way, Carlos, last week we discussed can I. I think I found that it should be under kubectl options, and that will give you all the global options.
So last week we were trying to figure out
where we find
the AS, right?
Yeah, it should be under kubectl options.
Oh, options.
Yeah, only that. Yeah.
Oh my God, you're a genius. So last
week,
I
just looked for it.
Last week we were trying to figure out where do the document something like -- as AS. So it's under options. Oh my God. Okay, you're so good at this. Yes, this is super useful when you were going to take the exam, because these flags are global. So when you want to do the can I, you have to use the as. And we were looking like how do I specify -- as when it's a user versus a service account. So when it's a service account, you have to specify system, service account, the namespace, and then the service account. When it's a user, you just put the name of the user. And of course, they don't have an example here.
No, I think they don't.
But at least we found that is documented here.
Yeah.
But yeah, let me see if there's an example. So yeah, this is something that you can find in the documentation. So just try to remember these parts. Like some parts you have to do. So so let's run it to see if this works. Didn't work? I think there's a problem. with this command. What's the problem?
Which one?
So we did the okay. No, there's no problems. It's just this thing gets copied, so this is just a comment. Like it's a comment. So everything works. So if you want to see, we want to see the row binding. We can say the row binding that we just created. Okay, get row binding, and then the name was what? It doesn't say what to call.
It's only a default, so probably it's not a lot.
Yeah, so it's this one, right? So I created a row binding with the row ref, which is a cluster row. Like doesn't have to be row, and then the service account is secure SA. So that's what the command did. This is the YAML that I generated. Okay, so that's it. Let's go back to scenarios. Let's find another one. Let's find a networking one. I want to do networking.
Right back.
Networking. Where change rollback deployment, create a Apache deployment. It should be taints, modifying cluster DNS.
And the next one.
Resource service IP from pod.
We can do both, I think. And
this one. Let's do CoreDNS. Something about CoreDNS. Do they? I don't remember. This was an exam. I mean, I think the exam some very long time that is totally different. So I'm not saying anything that is there. But if they tell you to change the service cluster IP range that's given to each service to 196, this is a CIDR, right? Hint: modify the Kubernetes API server pod YAML. Oh, so this is a cool thing. So this is the service cluster IP range. This is a configuration on the kube-api server. So you need to look of like, what is the configuration kube? In kind, I think these all are kind clusters that they do an exam. So you can do get pods just to show like where that is. So the kube-api server is here, and then we'll look on how to modify it, because what misconception on people is like they try to change the deployment here. That's a really misconception, to edit the deployment here, and then it doesn't affect permanently, and that's the wrong answer. So maybe we do the wrong answer. Because they're static pods that start from a YAML file that the kubelet starts in a folder. So you need to go to the control plane and modify the YAML file. But if you want to see how the etcd gets started, you can do something like k edit deployment -n kube system, right? And we're looking for a deployment of kube-api. So it will be something like, oh, there's no deployments here, I think, right?
Yeah, I think that's a static pod. So you need to edit the file.
Oh yeah, I think maybe this was a misconception. Sometimes it shows up here and people try to edit it and they cannot find the deployment. But just to deployment to display them, so I can do k edit pod, right? -n.
We cannot edit a pod, right?
We cannot edit. I'll just do edit so we can see the YAML in a nice. I'm hoping that the nice UI shows up. Yeah, Vim, right? I was looking for the color coded way of teaching teaching here. So you can see here that this is how the kube-api server gets started. In the exam, you may need to modify this file a couple of times to fix things or change configuration. So the asking is to change the service IP CIDR. So that configuration is located here. I was thinking that was here. Oh, here it is. Right? I think it's this one. Service cluster IP range 10.96.0.0.12. So that's a file that you need to modify. But as I said, like, you're not going to modify a pod. You modify the YAML. So let's find the YAML. So in the exam, you will go to the control plane, which we already located. And then we can go to that folder, right? Kubernetes. And then there should be a manifest. And there should be a kube-api server. So if we do vim kube-api server, and we need to modify that line. Is that the correct answer, or am I really wrong? I don't mind to be wrong. I'm recorded.
I think this one is correct.
So it's saying to maybe add a 0 here, right? 096 0012. Let's see the solution. We got it correct. So Vim, and then it says to, it doesn't say what to change. Let's do next. See what happens. Okay, so that, it didn't say it, but I think this is actually the answer. So what happens? So maybe a question for everyone: can I do this in a real cluster that has production workloads? What will happen? Do we have problems, or is it everything going to be okay? I'm going to save it. Anyone knows?
You will. I would think that you probably at some point you will have two different seeders for the old seeder of the services and the new. The new services will have IPs from that seeder, and the old will probably. I don't see any problem to have two different seeders. I don't know.
So what's going to happen is the CoreDNS will start picking up that config. Let me see. For the default service, then it will get a new one. So the net answer is, since everything's using DNS, right? Then nobody's referring this IP address as hard code. So people that have DNS, not people, but the clients, right? Any client in the Kubernetes space, any pod that has a IP address of a service is through DNS. So DNS has a time TTL, right? So the next time they need to refresh and get DNS, instead of 10, it will be 100. So in theory, the design should be around DNS, so it should be okay.
I thought of one thing, which is probably to have overlapping with the pod's IP. Maybe that would be a problem.
And yeah, and then that's the other thing. Like, I need to double check, because this is something that people don't do in practice, kind of thing. Like, once you have these things, usually they get a new cluster with a new configuration, move the workloads, don't mess around with this.
Yes. Just what you said. I don't know. Let's try it and see if everything breaks or not. I wouldn't touch it. I just wouldn't touch it.
So yeah, Jack is correct. So I'm trying to be a little bit like a teacher, right, in theory, and then a little bit of pragmatic. Like in practice, people don't do this.
No.
Don't risk it, because they can say, "Oh yeah, it used to work like that in Kubernetes 128, and we changed it in 129. You happen to have 130, so oh, I didn't know that." But yeah, as you can see, it says 10.96 or something. Eventually, I think it would change. I don't know if it would change these IP addresses or new IP addresses. And as you said, these ones still are valid in the IP tables. But that's homework. The next one is, it says change the IP address associated with the cluster DNS service. In the kube system, we have kube system namespace, and then we have this, right? So if we do this, this is the service. You're editing the service of kube DNS in here, and it's saying to change the, okay, so this is the thing that is saying that it didn't change automatically, so you need to come in here and actually change the numbers in here for the thing to work, right? Because this was like burnt in. So any service would not pick up, like Jack said, it would not pick up the thing. So you have to like manually, like surgically start updating everything. So if we modify this change would not apply, but the YAML will be safe in TMP. Oh, because we cannot change. So that could be a challenge on the exam. They may ask you something that is not allowed. So, for example, if I try to save this, there's an error, right? Because I cannot change them, may not change one set, so I cannot change them. So it's saying may not change it, and it's saved in the temporary directory. So to force the change, replace the service with the YAML that we save. So in this case, let me exit, and then we have the file here. We made the change, right? So this one has the 100 dot something. So to change it, you have to like replace it. So the command is replace, kubectl replace. So let me run that. K replace -f, and then the thing that, oh, I got K replace and the TMP file, which was /tmp/ what's the name of the file? kubectl something, right? Edit 2255, that one. So now, oh, I didn't pass a force. I didn't pass a force. So if you do this and you get a trouble, right, you have to pass the -- force. Like, I really want you to just write this into etcd. Basically, you're saying, like, I don't care about your whatever you're checking, just force it. So that got deleted and that got replaced. So that's something that people need to be aware with the replace command. It actually does, I think it actually does a delete and then a recreate on etcd. So it doesn't do an update, and then we get the new value, and then now we have the 100.96.0.10, and now DNS will start working, right? Because people were asking, this is where DNS is located. That this is the service that people use for UDP, right? For all the pods. I say people, like the pods are using this to get to the DNS server, and then but they have the hard-coded number, so that should be something that needs to be updated. In order to change, this is, I think Chad is just explaining what I just read. To change how the new pods will pick up their DNS info, right? So the pods need the IP address of the DNS server. Change the kubelet config to use the cluster DNS of the new one, right? This cluster. So now the kubelet needs to give the IP address to the pods. Perform the change to the config.yaml on the node where pods are running. So you have to go to every pod and tell update kubelet to say, hey, this is the new IP address. When pods come in, that is the DNS server that they should be using. So another reason why it's not a good idea to do it on a cluster.
So here's an example where this is more than just testing you on your skills. This is training. This is like, where have I read this ever anywhere? There's no -- help that tells you this stuff. This is
correct.
This is beyond a practice test. That's why this is really, big check for me. This is really good.
Yep, exactly. So we need to update the kubelet. It says config map. Kubelet doesn't have a config map. Reload the kubelet configuration without restarting. Why is it say config map? This is not a config map. This is just configuration of kubelet. There's no config map, if I'm correct. Let me check. Modify the kubelet config. So that's one piece. Edit the kubelet config map. So this is configuration for the kubelets. And then do a kube-adm upgrade node face kubelet config. I see, to apply it and then restart. Interesting. Like Jack said, this is a multi-step like admin training. So let's change the kubelet config, which is this one.
The moral lesson: never change anything work.
Oh yeah, and what are they doing teaching people about the force option? -- force? Hey, it doesn't work. Let's try forcing it.
Well, sometimes you have to do it, right? If you're admin and you have one cluster and you need to surgically do something, right? Maybe you have some downtime and you need to fix it. These are the type of skills you may need to know. So this would change the config.yaml, right? I change it to 100. Let me double check if I did that correct. That's the cluster DNS. And then edit the kubelet config map. I need to do more investigation. I need to remember. I need to jump to a meeting, but I'll finish this one. It's saying to edit the config map. I'm confused why I need to edit the config map, but I will do it. And maybe this is homework for us to come back, or maybe ask Chad. Change the config of, because kubelet is the system service. it should be using the config.yaml. I don't know why this config map needs to also be changed. Maybe this is just quirks of Kubernetes. So I change it there, and then I do an upgrade node phase, phase kubelet. So kube-adm has phases. You can put phase, blah, like a node has different phases, so you can upgrade different parts. But the last part is the one that I was expecting to do, not kube-adm for this type of change. If I already did the change, I don't have to do a node phase, but maybe something else needs to be configured. But daemon reload for sure, and restart kubelet. So because yeah, it depends how you install kubelet. I work with systems like in AWS, some nodes don't use kube-adm to install the kubelet. Kubelet is just a system service, and you just edit the config.yaml and then restart kubelet, and then everybody's happy. There's no kube-adm involved. So in this case, he asked for that. And then the last one is start a pod, NetShoot, like our friend, right? So that's a good thing that he's teaching about NetShoot. And then check the resolve.conf that the kubelet is putting right on this pod, and make sure that it has the new IP address, and then do a nslookup. So if we start NetShoot, then we execute into it. Let me run it again. Or maybe stuff not get pods. I was creating.
Can you just go to the? Can you click next, or do you really have to do this whole solution to be able, before you can do next?
I think you can click next and skip it.
I got stuck when I was doing it, and I had to type in the whole solution. I figured I was doing something wrong.
Oh, really? Maybe some exercises are like checking.
No, I'll look. You have to go to your next meeting. I'm really appreciative of your time here. This is really good.
Yeah, bash, right? And then cat this guy. So this is not a copy. This is just put this here. So this has 196. And then we can do an nslookup on what example is not something that, well, yeah, I guess we can do that. But I don't think it's, we got some IP address, which I think is a fake one or something like that. And I think that's it. I think that's it for today. Hopefully you guys learned something. I enjoyed this stuff. Like, that's how I learned.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. See you folks next week.
Thank you very much. Have a nice weekend.
Bye.
Bye.